Cash is tight. What's more important, cutting expenses or increasing your income? Ted Michalos and I discuss it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Okay, Ted, according to my cue cards here, it says that all of the financial experts on the World Wide Web
I see that.
say to be financially successful, you must cut your expenses. Okay, well, that makes sense. But why not also focus on increasing your income? Now, as you know, I've always said, I say this every day when you walk into the office, our clients don't have a debt problem, they have an income problem. Am I right on that or am I wrong?
Well, obviously anyone calling us has probably got a perceived debt problem. That's what we do. We fix people's debts. But certainly that may just be a symptom of the overall problem, which is they're spending more money than they have. Well, how do you correct that? Either spend less, which is what people have been saying all along, or what you're now advancing is try to earn more.
Yeah, and obviously I agree with spending less and earning more.
Right. The final answer for most people is almost always a combination of the two.
Right, whatever you can do. So let's start with some stats, shall we?
Okay.
From our Joe Detter, Hoyes and Michalos bankruptcy study, which of course we talked about, I guess, a couple of months ago now, the average household income. So this is not the income of the person who's doing the proposal, it's their whole household.
It's the family.
The family. Although if we looked at it for the person, the numbers would be correspondingly up or down. So in 2011, the average household income of our clients was about $3,000. In 2021, 10 years later, it was about $3,000.
Okay.
2022, it was up to $3,200 because 2022 was a year that there was, bit of inflation, government benefits were still around, whatever.
Wages generally went up in 2022.
Right. That is, however, an increase of 6.5% in 11 years. That's not a very big number.
Right.
In fact, I did more research. I did more show prep. The CPI, you're familiar with the CPI.
I am.
The Consumer Price Index. In 2011, and what I did was I went to the Bank of Canada inflation calculator. So
and you're going to put all these links in there.
I'll put the links there if you wanted to play the home game.
Right.
So 2011, the level was 117.8. January of 2023, it was 153.9. That would be an increase of over 30% between January 2011 and January 2023. So what does that mean? It means that incomes in our study were up 6.5%, but expenses notionally were up 30%.
Right.
There's a problem right there.
There is. I'm not going to play with your numbers. We kind of...
Well, and I've obviously bastardized them.
No, they support the theory. In 2011, though, we had a much higher percentage of our clients owned houses. So my guess is the profile was higher for the income for the households than it was now. So
yes,
the discrepancy may not be as great.
And so you're right. But the counter argument to that is your grocery bill 30% higher than it was 10 or 11 years ago?
It's 30% higher than it was a year ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, food inflation over the last year is running somewhere between 10 and 15%, depending on what numbers you want to pull.
And what you substitute.
And what you substitute and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, the beauty of statistics is you can make them say whatever you want.
That's right.
It's all...
the village watchmaker puts down whatever number he wants.
There you go.
Joke.
And that's kind of what we're doing here. So, but I think everyone watching this would agree, yes, incomes have not gone up as fast as expenses.
Right.
I don't think there's anybody who would disagree with that. And of course, I guess the other part of the point is here, you can only cut your expenses so much. Like they can only go down to zero.
Right. Well, and on top of that, you only have so much control over some of your expenses. I mean, if you've got a lease someplace, the rent's gone up, well, you can move to a cheaper place. First, you got to find it, and then you still got to run out the lease.
And you can't do that tomorrow.
Right.
Because like you say, there's a lease, I've got an apartment lease, a car lease, whatever.
Right.
So on the flip side, though, and that's what I want to talk about today is income, theoretically, you can increase your income by an unlimited amount. Theoretically. But it is certainly easier to increase your income by, let's say, 50% over a period of time than it is to cut your expenses by 50%. Yeah. Depending on what your expenses are. I mean, it's unlikely you're going to find a place to rent for $200 a month. It's unlikely you can buy the food you need for $50 a month. Like there is a floor to it. So, okay, so let's talk about options for increasing income. So the obvious one that everyone is thinking, well, okay, I either get a second job or a side hustle, something like that. Fantastic.
Sure.
What are the problems with that, though?
Well, the first problem is how long can you keep it up? It's just unsustainable for most people. So if you're already working a full-time job, maybe you got a family to look after, and you say, well, I can work part-time another 20 hours a week. You can do it short-term. Long-term, it's a hell of a challenge.
Yeah, and we've had this discussion with clients many times, and I've said exactly that to them. I've got a few right now who said, you know what, for the next 3 months, I'm going to do the double shifts.
I'm going to pound
away. I'll work the weekends, whatever, because for 3 months I can do it.
Right.
And that'll free up a bunch of cash. I can get that thing paid off. I could do this. I can do that. So I agree with you. It's not sustainable long-term. Short-term, okay. But you're right. Your family situation is going to have a lot to do with that.
Right. Well, and it turns out then that you're working just to pay bills. And now you were already doing that, but now you're working even more just to pay bills. At some point, you're going to start to resent it. So it's not just that it's going to wear you down physically, it's going to wear you down mentally.
So let's assume that's probably not a long-term strategy,
right?
Working, 100 hours a week. So normally we do the practical advice at the end, but let's just do it right now. Let's go right to practical advice.
Yep.
How then, if we accept my premise that increasing your income would be a good idea, what are some ways other than I'm going to, work 80 hours a week at 2 jobs? What are some other ways, thought process to think about how I can increase my income? Well,
so depending on what you're doing now, is there any way to enhance or improve your skill set so that you can potentially earn more money? So, the place that you're working, are you working in a factory where you're doing a certain assembly job, but with some extra training, if you went and asked for it, they'd move you into the next tier up, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's a longer-term strategy, obviously. That doesn't solve your problem today, but that is a really good long-term strategy because once you move from a level 20 to a level 25, you're there forever.
Well, and what usually happens when you move up to a higher skilled position, the work is usually less onerous too. So you get a double whammy here. It's that you're getting paid more to do a job you're using more of your brain and less of your brawn.
Yeah, I guess if I'm a mechanic and I'm crawling under cars and lifting stuff and I move up to, I don't know, whatever, the service advisor or something, I don't know if they make more money or not.
Depends on the piecework that the mechanic does, but it's a hell of a lot easier life.
Right. In fact, I had that exact discussion with a client of mine yesterday. I won't say where he works, but it's a company everyone goes to all the time. And he was, here, and now they've moved him up to here, but he doesn't get the overtime or the piecework or whatever.
Right.
So he gets his next paycheck in a couple of weeks, so he'll see how much it's gone up. But he said, you know what? Exactly what you just said. A lot easier. You can't do the hard physical stuff forever.
And and the older you get, the more sense that makes too. You can't be swinging a shovel your whole life.
How do you, unless you're really strong, how do you make the decision about whether or not you should go back to school? Because what you just described was, hey, I could, take some training at the company I'm at and move up a level. But some things it's like, well, I got to go back to school, get a college diploma, get a university degree, take some courses. How do you think about that?
So it depends on what you mean by back to school. Are you going to have to literally quit your job, go on some kind of training allowance or EI and hope that you can get through the educational enhancements before you run out of that money? Or is this something you can do in the evenings or while you're actually at work? So it depends on the definition of it. And if you're going to end up taking on a whole bunch of student debt to go back to school, and there's not a clear path that it's going to repay itself in a short period of time, I don't generally recommend it.
There better be a really clear path.
That's right. They'll give you student loans to do just about anything if you ask for it, but be careful, folks. We see so many people come in with student loans. Yeah,
it is often a disaster. So I'm a big believer in, if I can take one course in the evening, I can't get a university degree taking one course in the evening or else it'll take me 10 years. Right. And maybe that is what you do.
But a degree may not actually get you more money. You want actual practical skills that people can use.
Yeah.
And that's community college. It's even online, or your employer. Ask them specifically, what can I do to make myself more valuable to you?
Yeah. If it's a case of taking that that course so I can learn that program, Excel or that CAD/CAM program or whatever it is, great. That's not a 4-year commitment.
Yeah.
But that might be a skill that's very valuable.
Here's a simple example. You're a picker at an Amazon warehouse and they tell you, if you had your forklift operator's ticket, you'd be able to do that job. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
And that's an excellent example because that's a very practical one. And how long does it take you to get your forklift ticket?
Yeah, you can probably do it in a week and a half or something.
It's not a huge thing, but now you've got another skill and that leverages it. So
and Amazon will probably pay for it.
Yep. Well, they're happy to be paying for whatever they can.
Okay.
So if you are working at a job now and can advance in that job, what does it take to go up to the next level? Talk to your boss, figure that out. What about if you are just starting in your career? So you're brand new. What's the thought process there then?
So if you're starting in a career, take a look around you at the people that have been doing it for a while that are making more money than you and ask them, what are the things you should do to follow in their footsteps to get their job? That just makes sense.
Well, and that's, I'm sure, what you and I did when we were young kids starting out.
I used to drive trucks for a living.
There you go.
That, right?
There you go. I do remember that. Well, and okay, let's go on a sidetrack here and talk about that.
Yep.
So you were a truck driver for like 5 years or something.
That's right.
And like literally driving a truck. This is not a euphemism.
No, I was the Eastern Seaboard and the Southern States.
You were driving a truck. And so when you were driving a truck, were you thinking ahead that, okay, someday I want to be on Doug Hoyes' podcast? Is that what your thought
That's
process
exactly what I was thinking because I'd never heard your name at that point, but I had a mythical experience.
And podcast did not exist 30 years ago.
What happened was after about 3 years of driving full time, I had enough money in the bank that I either could have bought a tractor, it's another name for a truck, and started doing that, or I had enough that I could go to school. So I decided to go to school. And while I was going to school, I was still working 25 hours a week driving trucks in the evenings and weekends. So that's how that was affordable for me.
And as a result, you didn't graduate with massive student loans. Of course, back then that wasn't a big deal anyways.
That's right, because tuition was $4,000 or something.
It was not a big deal. So you had your eyes on the prize.
Right.
And so you went back to school and did business type stuff and whatnot and ended up becoming an accountant, and the rest is history. So, okay. And the way you did it was funded it yourself. So it took longer than it otherwise would have taken.
Right.
But you ended up not with massive debt at the end. So that's the balancing out. Okay. So then when you got to your first job as an accountant, which I assume was at a big accounting firm.
Yep.
We're not going to mention them because they're not sponsors of the show and we don't work there anymore.
And they never would.
Although they're no longer in
our line of
personal insolvency business, so it doesn't matter, nor is the company I started with. What I used to do was exactly what you described. I'm always watching the person the level above me.
Right. What do I have to do to get their job? Because their job looks better than mine.
Right. And so we started off, I did anyways, as an auditor. Mm-hmm. So you start off as the junior guy, and then I guess you become the less junior guy, and then the senior guy, and the manager guy, or whatever.
Right.
Okay, so what does that guy do that I don't know how to do? How do I learn how to do that? In that case, a lot of it was practical on the job stuff. Right. That's one of the disadvantages of the whole work from home thing now. You can't go out and have lunch with the person above you and pick their brain and find out how they do what they do.
That's right. Well, there's a general lack of FaceTime unless you're in some kind of Zoom meeting or a GoTo meeting
Well, and a Zoom meeting is a meeting.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of chit chat before and afterwards. Mm-hmm. Everything I learned on the job was at lunch, or if we went out for a Coca-Cola after the work day was done.
Right.
So I think if you're in a career, figure out what's happening above you. And then I would also say, don't just do the bare minimum.
Right.
So now that's a slippery slope there, because if you start saying, well, I'll take on that project and that project and that project and do everybody else's work and you're going to pay me the same, mm-hmm. then I guess you're just a schlub, right? Like, okay,
it's all of this has got to be strategic to some extent, right? You want to do the extra work, but you want people to recognize that you're doing the extra work and you're more valuable. So that if anything does go wrong at work and they've got to look at, well, who do I need, Bob or Jane? No, I'm going to keep Jane because Jane was the go-getter that asked for all this extra stuff. But you don't want to just do all of Bob's work and get nothing for it.
Right. If Jane knows how to do 5 different things and Bob knows how to do 1,
Jane's more valuable.
It's pretty simple. Do you believe in finding a mentor, or is that overstated and silly?
Well, it depends on the nature of the culture where you're working. So in a in a smaller owner-managed enterprise, certainly having a mentor is going to be advantageous if the mentor's got some sort of ties to upper management, right? One of the owners. In a huge corporation, you pick the wrong mentor and you could get slotted in the wrong place. So it takes a little bit of thought. But obviously having somebody that's experienced, that's been through all of the paths that you have to follow, there's going to be an advantage to that.
And really what you're describing is having a plan.
That's right.
Like, okay, this is kind of where I'd like to get to. I'm a truck driver now, but I'd like to be on a podcast. How do I get there? What do I need to do? Maybe I got to join the podcasting association, listen to podcasts, whatever.
Right.
Okay. So we've talked about if you are new and just starting out, learn some extra tasks, build your skill set, maybe find a mentor. What if you are currently working in a dead end job?
Right. Well, so the next example really is you're doing whatever type of job it is and you realize I need to switch careers to get on another path. And that would be my trucking example again, right? Driving a truck, making a pretty good living for a young guy, but the future potential of getting an accounting designation and going that way was so much higher. And
so what made you, so I understand, okay, truck driving, I'm capped out. I get paid by the mile or the hour or whatever it is.
Got to keep the wheels rolling.
Got to keep those wheels rolling. So if I go into something professional, then I'm not limited by that. What made you say, I want to go down this path as opposed to one of the others? I mean, were you studying accounting? Were you studying general business? Were you, what?
So because of where I lived at the time, which was Peterborough, the only thing I could study was general business. I did all of my accounting credits at York University at night and in the summers because they just weren't available in Peterborough. But the focus was, when I get out of here, what is it that I want? Well, a CA designation had more value than a business degree. MBA, you could argue, might be worth more, but I wasn't interested in that at the time. And so how do I get from where I am in Peterborough to get that CA? And then while I was studying for that, I realized that I had to consolidate my debts 2 or 3 times over those 3 years because of the cash flow and the way things were handling. People probably need help with that. I encountered the insolvency world in my third-year law course and was, okay, this makes sense. There's going to be a demand for this. Apparently, I was right.
You were right. You were right. So you could have become a debt consultant.
I could have become a debt consultant.
Why didn't you do that? We'll edit that part out of this show.
That's right.
So you were thinking about what was in demand.
Right. Where are the jobs of the future going to be? Where does somebody need me? And are they going to be willing to pay me?
And can I do it? I guess
right. That
would be the other thing, because I guess you could have become a dentist too, but I'm not doing that. I'm not.
Should have become an engineer. I like to break things.
Well, or I still think a plumber is the most
right answer.
The most important job in history, because we always use water. Mm-hmm. So if you are in a dead end job now, and when I say dead end job, I mean your evaluation of the job.
Right. It's your opinion of where do you think this job's going to put you in 5 years. If it's the exact same place, then that's probably a dead end job.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there watching this going, an accountant, that's a dead end job. With AI, it's not going to exist in 5 years.
Right.
And to a certain extent,
they may be right.
That's probably true. So you perceive that what you're doing is a dead end job. How do you go through the thought process of figuring out what's going to be in demand? Who knows what's going to be in demand 5 years from now?
And that's difficult. I mean, there's certainly all sorts of information on the internet. Whether or not you can trust it or not is a hard decision. Talk to people that you know. Look around. As much as what's going to be in demand, what are you actually interested in and going to enjoy? Because there's not much point training for a career that you're going to hate. But that's a different conversation.
So do you think truck drivers will be in demand 10 years from now?
I think they're probably always going to have human beings in the trucks, even when they're driving themselves as autonomously, just in case.
But we don't know.
Right.
We have no idea.
Tell me which stocks to buy. I'll look
exactly, at it. Exactly. So this is not simple. It's you really got to think it through and realize that you might not make the completely right decision. The reason I went into accounting and became a CA like you, and we're now called CPAs because it's got an extra letter, is that was a pretty broad-based thing.
Right. It's a good starting point for just about anything.
Well, every big company has an accountant.
Right. Or 20. And of course, there's accounting firms and there's all the stuff that you branch out to. Obviously, we do debt-related stuff, but there's mergers and acquisitions, evaluations, and everything else.
Right.
So
if I was wrong, and I guess I was wrong because I started off working as an auditor.
But you had no choice.
I had no choice. That's how you get your training, and I escaped it as quickly as I could. But, I'm sure on my first day at the job, I thought, okay, well, someday I'll be a partner at this big firm.
Right.
And I wasn't. But
I remember that meeting.
Yeah, there you go.
When we discovered we weren't going to be.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
It's a different show.
We then both ended up at the same big firm, and someday we'll tell the whole story. So, okay, I'm in this job. I want to progress. What's in demand? What skills do I actually have? What can I develop?
Right.
Which is very similar to what we said if you're, just starting out, because it's the same thought process. And then I think the other huge component of it is, who do you know?
Yeah, that's right. It's not what you know, it's who you know, and there's a lot of truth to that saying.
Well, and the old saying is, it's not who you know that matters, it's who I know that matters. That's what it really comes down to.
Right.
So when I was thinking about, accounting as a career, I knew a guy who was an accountant.
Makes sense.
And he seemed reasonably successful. He had a nice house and everything and seemed like a good guy. So I could see myself doing the same sort of thing. Did you ever know an accountant?
Oh, sure. My mother's second husband was a partner in a
There you go.
law firm. So.
And so that, again, you had this, okay, if it worked for that guy.
That's right. If it worked for that guy.
Come on, then I can probably do it as well.
We may have to edit that part out.
Yeah, we'll edit that part too. Does he listen to the podcast?
Probably not.
Probably not. He was his inspiration. Okay, there we go. We'll leave that part in. So you, by knowing someone who is doing what it is you ultimately want to do, talk to them, find out, ask some questions, because I think knowledge on the ground is more important than anything you look at in a book. Okay, now I got another question for you. So let's say that I've done a bunch of this stuff and I've kind of reinvented myself, but all the good jobs are over here and I live over here.
Right.
So how do I think through at what point I should be moving to a different city, uprooting and going?
The big challenge in Canada is always, I'm in Ontario and it looks like there's a boom in Alberta. You move out to Alberta and it slows down. Well, maybe I should go back to Ontario. That's just the classic example we see all the time. And it's a question of, what we just talked about. Is there a job available for you? Have you got the skill set and the knowledge? Do you know somebody there that can help you get in that job? What's it going to cost to move there? What's it going to cost to live there? Lots of things to factor in.
Yeah.
And are you mobile?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you take the wife and kids?
Yep. Yeah. If you've got a spouse, kids, a dog, and a goldfish, okay, it's a little harder than if you're a single person. And
right.
One of the reasons it's nice if you don't own a house is you're more mobile.
Right.
I break my lease and off I go. If I've got a house, well, I got to sell this one, buy another one. It becomes somewhat more complicated.
Probably got more stuff to pack up.
And more stuff there. That's for sure. Well, and your example about moving to Alberta is a very common one because we see that all the time. And as we record this, I don't know what the price of oil is today. But my guess is it will go up and then it will go down because that's what it's been doing for the last 100 years.
Right.
So there's my prediction, everybody. You can bank on it. But yeah, where are we in the cycle? Do I want to be going out there at the peak or not or what? I guess also, do I know anybody there? If I got family out there, because if I can crash with them for a couple of months, okay, then at least.
How do I get established?
Yeah. Well, how do you know? So what area of the city should I be living in? Like,
if you got kids, it's critical for schools and everything else. Are you going to be close to services, facilities? Are you going to be up in the middle of somewhere north of Alberta where there's nothing, and so you're getting paid 3 times as much, but it costs you $10 for a Coke?
Fort Mac, baby. Yeah, it was fantastic when the boom was happening, and not so fantastic otherwise. Explain opportunity cost and how that all facts into this decision.
Well, so somebody came up with this. It's a clever term that basically means whenever you're doing something, you have to forego something else. So the opportunity cost is, what am I giving up in order to do this? So if I move to Alberta, what am I giving up in Ontario? My family, my friends, the stability, the job I've had forever. I go to Alberta, there's the risks associated with, new to a job, that sort of thing. Opportunity cost is real, but it's hard to quantify.
How much of a raise do I need to get to move?
Right. What number is the right number?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if the new company I'm going to is going to pay for my moving costs, I don't have to worry about that.
Unless you got to stay with them for 3 years. There's always catches.
And if I'm just going out there to find a better job, well, then I'm paying for the whole thing.
Right.
okay, this gets really expensive then. So again, as an accountant, I'd be doing some numbers.
Right.
How much is it going to cost me to move? Now, maybe I can sell a bunch of my stuff here because I don't really need it. I can, buy a chair when I get there.
Yep.
And I can, pack up the station wagon. Do people still have station wagons?
Not many. Everybody drives a sport ute now.
A sport ute.
A tall wagon.
I can pack up my tall wagon and off I go. So a lot of factors to consider. What if the new job, well, let me ask this a different way. Is it a bad idea to take a new job even if it's more money?
Sure, because there's always risks with change. And so one of the tricks of all of this stuff is to try to mitigate your risk. If you know nothing about the place you're going to and you've responded to an ad on the internet, they're going to pay you 50% more to go out and work in the oil patch. And then you get there, you realize, one, you hate the job, or two, there's no stability. We only need you for 2 weeks. Sorry, price of oil's dropped, you're out of here. Those are all risks, and you have to mitigate those risks to make, is it worth the move?
Yeah, knowing that they're going to pay me $10 an hour or $10 an hour more than I'm getting now, but if I'm going to be working 20 hours less a week, that's not so good.
Is there any advantage? Or if it's going to cost you 50% more to live.
Mm-hmm. But it is also true, is it not, that the way you get the biggest increases is by going to a different job.
Yes, it's in almost every profession, the way to get a big increase is to jump employers to somebody else, because you will get some sort of increase for the move. Now, you then may be stuck on that track where it's all programmed out for the next 5 years and you got to move again, but that just seems to be the way the world works.
Yeah, there's very few people who've been at the same company for 24 years. Well, you and I have. But other than that, not so many. So, okay, there's a whole lot of different factors in here. I guess you pull out a sheet of paper and you write the pros and cons and you crunch some numbers, and that's about all you can do.
Well, and remember what we started talking about was everyone's telling you to reduce your expenses. We're telling you now, well, can you look at increasing your income? And I think what we've determined is it's certainly possible, but it's not as easy as just saying I'm going to go out and start working for Timmy's tomorrow.
Right. You got to
give it some thought.
You got to give it some thought. And then if you are successful and you do find ways to increase your income, what's the natural temptation?
Well, just like everybody else, I'm making more, so I got to spend more.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to get a better car. I got to dress a little nicer. I got to get a bigger apartment. Maybe I'll get that dog I've always wanted, all that sort of stuff. And so now, instead of doing something with that extra income, reducing your debt load or setting up a safety net, some kind of savings account, you end up spending it. And that's just about what everybody does.
Yeah. So and if I've moved to a job where I am working harder, or I'm,
well, let's do the example of somebody that you decided to get a second job. So you're working your original job, but now you're working 20 hours at something else. Probably now you're eating out more often. You're on a rush. You're not looking after yourself. Maybe you got to have somebody else walk the dog, there's all sorts of expenses that'll creep up and eat away at that extra money that you're earning.
Well, there's also the possibility you've bumped yourself up into a higher tax bracket.
Well, let's talk, the tax man. That's always good.
So,
and if nothing else, probably your two different employers in that example won't acknowledge the other employer, so you'd be undertaxed anyway, and then spring your own money.
Yep.
That's the worst thing.
Yeah, and we see that all the time.
Yep.
That's very common that I'm in the 20% tax bracket in each of my two jobs.
But together you're in the 25% or 29%.
And so
seniors, it's worse because I've got a pension, but I'm getting 3 different pensions and they don't take them into account.
Yep. And so great. I've been bringing in an extra $100 a week. That's fantastic. But really I'm owing an extra $50 a week in taxes that I hadn't factored in. And I'm making up numbers here, but you really got to look at the whole big picture. And what do you really want here?
Right. What you're looking for is some financial freedom, right? I mean, we started out, the reason people listen to this show, that they talk to us, is you've got some kind of debt issues. And so you're always being told you got debt issues. Well, reduce your expenses to free up as much money as possible. The show we're talking about will try to increase your income so you can free up as much money as possible. Well, the underlying problem here is you're spending more than you're earning for a certain lifestyle, and you've accumulated debt. We can help you get rid of the debt. And going forward, you need to learn a different way. Learn to live a different way. Easily said.
Exactly. Easy to say, hard to do. And I guess my final point on all this would be to bring it back to debt, because you're right. This is debt free in 30, so we're supposed to talk about debt on this show. If you do have a bunch of debt, I'm going to work a little extra, whack away at it. Fantastic.
Right.
If you happen to be bankrupt at the time,
It just costs you more.
Right. Because in a bankruptcy, the more money you make, the more you have to pay. So you got to be careful as to what the strategy is. Now, we do have people, and I mentioned it at the top of the show, that I've got clients who say, okay, I got a lot of debt. There's no way I can pay it back on my own. I'm going to file a consumer proposal. And then once the proposal's up and running, I know it's been accepted, I'm going to get that part-time job.
And pound away at it.
Pound away at it for 3 months, for 6 months, because whatever extra money you make in a proposal, it's your money.
Right.
There is no extra tax like there is in a bankruptcy. So I guess if the reason you are looking at increasing your income is because you've got debts to service, then I'll throw the commercial in here.
Right.
You want to talk to a licensed insolvency trustee to make sure that that strategy makes sense. It almost for sure does.
Yeah, you just got to do it in the right sequence.
You got to do it in the right sequence. That's right. the thing. You don't want to be working 2 jobs, file a consumer proposal when your income is up here, because then the creditors are going to say, oh, we need even more money because look at all the money.
For most people, this is a podcast. They can't see your hands.
They can't. Oh, no, they're all watching on YouTube there. They're all watching. So I was raising my hands for those watching or listening on the audio. So, okay,
let the record
good.
show that.
That's right. That's right. So, okay, good.
Right.
I think we've covered a lot of ground there. Any final comments you want to make on anything to do with this topic, or have we pretty much nailed it?
Anytime we talk around any of these subjects, what always comes up is you need to have a plan. And so many of us, we kind of go through life and we do what we've got to do because we've always done it that way. Whether it's increasing your income, decreasing your expenses, dealing with your debts, you've got to take a look at the issue and then develop a plan to deal with it, and you'll be better off.
There you go. And part of the plan may very well be increasing your income, and it may be a longer term plan, not something you can do immediately, but right. Think ahead and it all works out. Excellent. That is a great way to end it. Ted, thank you very much for being here. That is our show for today. I will, for those people watching on YouTube, put links to our bankruptcy study, the Bank of Canada inflation calculator, so you can look them up. In fact, I'll put links on the audio version of it too. So those people who are listening on Spotify or Apple or however you're listening to it, you can grab them there too. So again, if you can increase your income, fantastic. If you can cut your expenses at the same time, wonderful. Just don't let the expenses creep up as you're doing that.
Right.
That is our show for today. Until next week, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.